Have you ever really stopped to think about why some people seem to build wealth so easily, while so many others work their fingers to the bone and just struggle? Well, in his famous book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki says the answer has nothing to do with your salary or even how much education you have. Nope, it's all about your mindset.
So Kiyosaki's whole story kicks off with the advice he got from two very different father figures. His poor dad, his actual father, was a super educated government official who really valued job security. Then you have his rich dad, his friend's father, an entrepreneur who actually dropped out of school. And their ideas about money, they were polar opposites. One said the love of money is evil. The other, he argued that the lack of money is the real root of all evil.
I mean, just imagine you're a kid, hearing these two completely conflicting ideas from the two men you look up to. That choice, right there, between two different ways of thinking, that's the journey the book takes us on. And it really makes you stop and ask yourself, which one of these mindsets is quietly running my own financial life? Now, Rich Dad's lessons weren't happening in some stuffy classroom. His very first lesson was about a trap that millions and millions of us fall into without even realizing it. He called it the rat race.
It all started when Kiyosaki was just 9 years old. He wanted to learn how to make money, so Rich Dad gave him a very simple offer. He said, "I'll teach you, but not by talking. You have to come work for me." So he and his best friend, Mike, took a job at one of Rich Dad's stores.
10 cents an hour. For 3 hours every single Saturday, they just dusted off canned goods. It was grueling. And after a few weeks of this, with no real lessons in sight, Kiyosaki got fed up. He was ready to quit. He felt totally used. But that feeling of frustration, that was the lesson. See, Rich Dad finally explained that most people's lives are run by two big emotions, fear and desire. The fear of not having enough money to pay your bills, that's what gets you out the door to go to work. But then, desire kicks in. You want a nicer car, a better house, a vacation, and that keeps you chasing a bigger paycheck. That endless cycle, that is the rat race.
So the solution, the big mindset shift Rich Dad wanted them to have was this. Stop working for money. Instead, learn how to make money work for you. And that right there, that's the fundamental difference in thinking between the rich and pretty much everyone else. So Rich Dad stopped paying them altogether, and that forced them to get creative. They started looking around and they spotted an opportunity. The convenience store was just tossing out old comic books. So they came up with a system. They opened a little comic book library in a spare room and charged other kids 10 cents to come in and read for as long as they wanted. All of a sudden, they were making money even when they weren't there. They had just created their very first money-making asset.
And that story leads us straight to what is, without a doubt, the single most important lesson in the entire book. You can forget all the complex, confusing financial jargon. According to Rich Dad, there's really only one rule you need to get right. You have to know the difference between an asset and a liability.
But before we get to the definitions, just take a second. What do you think your most valuable asset is? Is it your house, your car, maybe your college degree? Really think about it, because the answer might not be what you expect.
All right, here's Rich Dad's definition. It's beautiful in its simplicity. An asset is anything that puts money in your pocket. That's it. Think about a rental property that pays you every month, or stocks that give you dividends. It's a money machine.
And a liability? Well, it's the exact opposite. A liability is anything that takes money out of your pocket. Simple as that. We're talking car payments, student loans, credit card debt, and yes, even the mortgage on the house you live in. These things cost you money month after month.
So here's where the path really diverge. The rich focus their energy on buying assets, things that generate more and more cash. But the middle class, they tend to spend their money on liabilities that they think are assets, with the number one example being their primary home, which is constantly pulling money out of their pockets for the mortgage, taxes, insurance, and repairs.
So what do you do with this information? Well, that brings us to lesson 3, mind your own business. Now, this doesn't mean you should march into work tomorrow and quit your job. No, it means your job is your profession, but your business is building up your asset column. The whole idea is to use the money from your job to buy assets that will eventually make you free. Kiyosaki has this great visual for it called the cash flow quadrant. On the left side, you've got E for employee and S for self-employed. In both cases, you're basically trading your time for money. If you don't work, you don't get paid. The goal is to move to the right side, B for business owner, where you own a system that makes money, and I for investor, where your money itself makes you more money. That move from left to right is the path to freedom. So what does this business, this asset column actually look like? Well, we're talking about real assets, things like businesses that can run without you having to be there every day. Stocks, bonds, real estate that generates rental income, or even royalties from a book or a song you wrote. The goal is to just keep adding these to your portfolio. Now check this out. This is one of the biggest, almost hidden advantages of being on the right side of that quadrant. It's all about taxes. See, as an employee, the sequence is you earn money, you pay taxes on it, and then you spend what's left. But for a business owner, they earn money, they spend it on business expenses, and then they pay taxes on whatever's left over. That simple change in sequence is an absolute game changer. When you really boil it all down, the message of this book isn't just about financial strategies. It's about something much more powerful. It's about realizing that your financial destiny isn't up to your boss or the economy. It's determined by the thousands of little choices you make every single day. This quote says it all, doesn't it? Every single dollar that comes into your life is a choice. You hold the power. Is that dollar going to buy a liability, something that will cost you more down the line? Or are you going to use it to buy an asset, something that will work to make you more money? That choice, made over and over again, is what builds your future. So the path forward is actually pretty straightforward. First, you have to commit to increasing your financial intelligence, always be learning. Second, you have to get crystal clear on the flow of money, what's an asset and what's a liability in your own life. And third, you have to consistently, deliberately choose to acquire assets, not liabilities. But you can know all of this stuff, you can read all the books, and still be stuck. Because Kiyosaki argues that the biggest roadblock isn't a lack of information, it's internal. It's that little voice of self-doubt, the fear of losing money, or just the comfort of playing it safe. Getting past that fear is the real final boss. So I want to leave you with this one last thought. If every single dollar you spend is a vote for the kind of life you want to live, what future are you voting for? Are your daily choices building a life of financial dependence or a life of financial freedom? Because the real lesson from Rich Dad is that the power to decide is entirely yours.